All right. Over the course of my lifetime, 1980 to current, 44 years, what has what have we as the people been told um, or pre-programmed to believe? When I was younger, I was always wondering about what happened to John F. Kennedy. There's no way that uh, a gentleman who could barely pass his marksmanship in the Marines was able to get 3 shots off from that rifle, from that distance and aim. The movie JFK proved that uh, snipers couldn't do it. We know what that deal is. We know that 1 week before John F. Kennedy was murdered in Dallas, he gave a quote to the editor in chief of the Washington Times that his administration and him had uncovered a plot at the uppermost echelon of the government to enslave every man, woman, and child in America. And he would do his best from his high office to expose that plot to the American people, so help him God. Well, people in charge didn't want to hear that. We can go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve. 1913, 1912, most of the passengers on the Titanic who were against the Federal Reserve being created didn't make it off the ship. People say coincidence. Okay. Let's move forward into the new millennia. Year 2000, you had New American Century. It was written by a think tank in D.C. 2001, June 28th, you had a gentleman on the radio, shortwave radio, called William Cooper on the Hour of the Time. And he investigated Whitewater. He did hours of material on Oklahoma City to prove that this was all government that was involved. Sure, you'd have to go on to BitChute or Rumble to find these things because YouTube isn't going to want it. But on the 28th of June, 2001, he spent about 15 minutes discussing how the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the largest budget in the history of the world, could not find Osama bin Laden, but a CNN reporter and his camera crew did, and interviewed him and his generals in his cave in Afghanistan. Okay. He said, anything that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even effing believe it. July 25th, 2001. Alex Jones called the 9/11 attacks. The day after my birthday, July 24th, 2001, Larry S. Silverstein bought the World Trade Center in a 99-year lease, buildings 1 through 7, and he insured specifically buildings 1, 2, and 7. That's the North and South Tower and the Solomon Brothers building for airline terror attacks. This is public record, folks. This is public record. You can look this up. Not going to do all the work for you. Now, let's put it in layman's terms. You, the viewer, put a shed in your backyard. You bought a new shed and you had it delivered. You had it set up. You put power to it, so you can keep your batteries charged and your lawn equipment or whatever. You could run a compressor or whatever you're doing out there. And you add it to the insurance on the house, to the house policy. And 6 weeks later, it burns to the ground with all your equipment in it, and you file a claim. Do you think that do you think you wouldn't be investigated by the insurance company? 6 weeks? It was there for 6 weeks and it burned to the ground? You're going to have every orifice of your body probed for the next 6 months before you get a check. Larry S. Silverstein bankrupted 35 insurance companies, as far as we know, and put 50,000 people out of work because he wanted to get paid for buildings 1, 2, and 7. Let's bump back a little bit. Prior to June, March 1st, 2001, the spin-off show to The X-Files was The Lone Gunman. It was about a newspaper group that investigated conspiracy theories out of Virginia. The pilot episode depicted something called Scenario 12D, airline terror attacks. And the premise of the entire episode was that Byers' dad worked for the CIA or one of the government agencies, and those agencies tried to unalive him because he knew too much. Well, turns out he faked his own unaliving so he could disappear. And then Byers flushes him out. And the explanation was pretty insane. It was that there were no wars, so the arms market was flat. So nobody was making any money in the arms dealing, which the federal government, let's be honest, is a huge arms dealer. And, well, they needed something to trigger a war. Now, I've heard people say, oh, come on, man. The federal government wouldn't do that to its own people. You have any idea how many hundreds of billions of dollars were at stake? You have any clue? I've seen people sell out their own families for $100,000. You're going to tell me the moralist people in the government, the bureaucrats, wouldn't sell out 3,000 innocent people like that for a couple $100 billion? Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a lot of trouble as a nation because we are so divided over stupid stuff. Shapes, colors, the names. Let's not forget the pronouns. We're so divided over the stupid stuff that we completely overlook the important stuff. What's the important stuff? Things like what we just discussed. JFK was against the establishment. He couldn't be bought. Couldn't be blackmailed. He didn't care. RFK Jr. or RFK Sr. Oh, Sirhan, that's a bunch of nonsense. It's nonsense. They needed him removed. I'm disappointed that Donald Trump and RFK Jr. couldn't put their egos aside for 2 minutes, sit down and say, hey, look, let's get together on this. The establishment, the elite, whoever they are, shadow government, tried to take out Trump. They successfully took out RFK Sr., JFK. And you're going to tell me that JFK Jr. just happened to be in a plane that crashed? I highly doubt it. Wasn't he running against Hillary Clinton for that Senate seat in New York, where he was a shoo-in? Ooh, geez, Louise, I don't know what happened there. Look, I'm no Rhodes Scholar. I don't even have a high school diploma. And if someone like me can figure out the pre-programming and see what's truly going on, then you have to ask yourself, what's stopping the people that actually have power? The people who are against these bureaucrats every day from just coming out and saying this stuff. A lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, the older generation, they can't handle this. What do you mean? Explain that to me. They can't handle it. Explain it. Because maybe I don't understand. You could handle collecting Social Security. You could handle being robbed blind through taxes. You can handle selling out your children's futures to the highest bidder. But when it comes to being told the absolute truth, you can't handle it. That's amazing to me. I had a neighbor where I was staying in New Jersey when Jeffrey Epstein got arrested at Teterboro Airport in Teterboro, New Jersey. Neighbor said, who's this Jeffrey Epstein guy? I said, I've known about him since 1997. I was 17. I was listening to a guy on shortwave radio in the basement of my house where I grew up out of Texas. His name was Alex Jones. And he had been talking about the elites trafficking youngsters since he'd been on the air. And I try to explain to people that, you know, a drug is a drug. You can only do so much of that drug before it doesn't do anything for you anymore. So people who drink will drink till they black out. It does nothing to them except shut them down. People who do dope will do it until they overdose, and then they'll have to do it again. Same thing with uppers and, you know, everything else. Well, money is a drug. Money's a drug. Eventually, the money doesn't create the dopamine hit that your brain requires to function. So you need something else. And the only other thing that you can do for that dopamine hit is now you move from money, because you went with drugs and the drugs stopped working. And now you're doing the money thing and that stopped working. So eventually you move on to stuff that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And the only way you can get away with that stuff is if you can purchase the Department of Justice. And that's what certain governors have done. And that's what a lot of the people in the bureaucratic nonsense that we call DC have done. The swamp, I hear people say drain the swamp. You can't drain a swamp. You can't drain a swamp. A swamp is a swamp. You dig in a swamp, it just fills back up with water and muck. Those are my thoughts. I'm just an American citizen concerned that my fellow Americans, no matter what color, creed, or religion, are being fed wrong information. And I think that we should all, with all this technology we have, with the smartphones and the tablets and the laptops and the internet, that we should be able to do more research and explore all aspects of the information, whether it be left or right, progressive, liberal, conservative, hard right, hard left. Look at it all, because the more information you have in your head, the more knowledge you have access to, the better decision making you will have. That's just the way it is. I heard something today when I went for lunch, and I'll leave you with this. This generation has no message and no compass. They have no message and no compass. What they have is hatred. There is no room in this world for hatred. Hatred is a weak man's game. If you are hating, you are weak. God bless everyone. God bless America. And let's hope we make it past the November election, because you're beginning to see the bubbling crude of hatred more and more. God bless and good luck.